The Gene Technology Bill is the government's plan to overhaul New Zealand's outdated GMO rules. It replaces the old Hazardous Substances and New Organisms Act of 96 to a system they say that will be a faster, risk-based approach so new gene research and tech can get moving. The new gene technology regulator will sit inside the Environmental Protection Authority. They say it'll be backed up by technical experts. And instead of focusing on how something was modified, the system will judge each case on the actual risk of the organism. MPI will enforce the rules. The activities will be grouped into risk tiers. Supporters say this finally drags New Zealand into the modern world. The bill passed its reading late last year and is expected to be in place by the end of this year. Gene technology, whether genetic editing, which alters existing DNA, or genetic modification, which introduces new genes, remains one of New Zealand's most divisive scientific issues. Jon Carapiet from GE Free New Zealand joins me now. Jon, good afternoon.
Hello.
Jon, look, thank you for being here. I wanted to have a chat because I saw that you were at the Canterbury AMP show, which wrapped up, I think, on the weekend.
That's right.
And yeah, what were you doing there, Jon?
Well, the AMP show is the biggest in the country, I think, and there was always a danger they were going to cancel it. They might have done that, but we went down. GEHonesty.nz organised a stall to talk to farmers. I was actually down there already for the Beyond the Buzzwords panel discussion at Lincoln University, organised by the Future Farmers. So that was the night before, and it was a very rainy day on a Thursday. Friday was the best day because there was a holiday down at the show. So lots of families and farmers. And we were there just to tell people about the bill, to ask them to contact their MPs to say, look, you've got to stop this bill because it's really extreme. And we got a really good response and had a chance to talk to some of the MPs down there as well.
Great. So I did see your post saying that you got some really good feedback. I saw a farmer was there with you. What were the MPs that popped over to your post?
Well, oh no, they didn't pop over to us. We're not that glamorous. We have to go and see them. You get to leave the stall for a little while. But so we've talked to there was the main ones actually were New Zealand First, ACT, and National, and they were the ones in power. Well, you say that, but it was really interesting. I mean, I did talk to New Zealand First, and of course, only on the 4th of November, we had the picnic outside Parliament to support what seemed to be New Zealand's first stand up and saying they can't support the bill as it stands because it's like basically goes too far. There aren't the precautions we need. There's no kind of like precautions for the GE-free farmers who are basically everybody farming in New Zealand. There's no protection of the export. So when Winston Peters came out and said, look, they're going to fix this bill, and we can talk about what a fix looks like. But if they can't fix it, someone asked him what he'd do, and he said, we won't support it. So certainly New Zealand First is saying it's not good enough. And you know, and to be honest, from hearing from the farmers and hearing the discussion at the Beyond the Buzzwords panel debate, it isn't fit for purpose. There's too much discussion to be had. And I think farmers know that. I mean, even farmers who support, you know, the idea of, we need the technology, when they hear, it's actually, it's a bit like the conversation you heard earlier. It's about don't call me Steve, call me Stephen, don't call me, call me Mike, call me Michael. Well, what's going on in the bill, and actually it's already gone in a bit before with some food labelling laws, is they're changing what they call GMOs. And when farmers find out that they could have no traceability or labelling of these gene-edited products, they won't know what they're planting, or they won't know who to sue if their farm gets accidentally contaminated by a GE crop. They start to see that farmers don't want anything that's going to harm their profits, and they've got a lot of doubts. And I think that's really what we heard from at least some of the people, and not all of the people at the AMP are farmers, by the way. A lot of them are just ordinary people seeing the farm stuff. But it's really clear from talking to people that there is actually a meeting point. I mean, I know the debate's very polarised, but I think most people agree
sorry, my love,
you should have a choice.
Yeah, look, I just want to jump in and just to run a few things by you, though. Most nations allow tightly regulated gene editing in agriculture and medicine, say, and global scientific consensus is that modern gene technology is safe. But that I understand from what you're saying, and I can hear you, is that still not enough to quell fears?
Well, it certainly doesn't seem to be enough to quell fears of the consumers in our export market. So whatever the scientists say, oh, this isn't genetic engineering, this is gene editing. It is actually genetic engineering. People want the choice. Even if they support the idea of it, they say, look, I see your point. I think it should be traced. You should know if it's gene edited. You should have a choice with labeling to decide whether to support it or not. And I guess the thing about that, the conference at Lincoln, which is, as I said, organised by concerned farmers, it was organised by future farmers, was that in a way, it's not just about safety. It can't just be about safety. You have to look at what you've done and where you've done it and what the exposure is to the public. So I think that's the big thing, is it safe to the kid who might be eating that product, or is it safe to someone who might be allergic to that product? So labeling and traceability become really important in the food sector, because that's what trust is built on. And people trust New Zealand products at the moment because we do have medicine. We do actually have GE stuff in New Zealand. We've got vaccines for farmers and stuff, but it's very we're the country that you're describing, very strictly regulated.
Is that the problem, John? Is that the number one problem? You want the labelling and the traceability. You think that's not going to happen in this bill?
Well, no, they've already said it's not going to happen because food standards cancel the labelling by redefining, basically going back to that conversation about naming it. They're saying these new breeding techniques or these precision breeding is not going to be called GMO anymore. It's going to be called these things. So we're not going to label them. But even in Europe, the food industry is saying, no, you've got to label it, you've got to trace it, you've got to have integrity for this food system. And I guess what we were hearing from the farmers that we talked to and the public, but the farmers are definitely saying, well, hang on a minute. So if there's no choice, then you're actually taking away the GE-free option. If it's all based on contamination, based on a little bit of contamination for coexistence, well, who pays for that? And I think the ACT people were quite good, because at the ACT tent, we started talking about liability and the fact that there was a call for civil liability, like a kind of like, if you pollute my farm, then you should be paying me to compensate. Now, that's not in the bill. And ACT has been very quiet on property rights and protecting the right to be GE-free, which is worth billions, in terms of the economy. So I think even ACT is seeing that there's some real problems with this bill and it needs to be probably changed in 5 or 6 ways that would really make it the middle path for New Zealand. And I don't want to see the bill pass as it stands. But if New Zealand First can get these basic fixes in place, then then it starts to make sense.
Okay, so at the moment, New Zealand currently requires strict containment and testing, and there's been no on-field testing. They're all been done in labs. But the gene technology bill proposes a case-by-case risk assessment, and there could be field tests. But if they changed, you said there's 5 or 6 things you want to change. If there was a labelling and traceability added to it, would the farmers, or would that be something that you would be happy with, or is this something you never want to see in New Zealand ever?
Well, we've already got it in New Zealand. We have got,
No, I mean, but what they're saying now, you don't want it to advance any further than what we're doing at the moment. It stays in the lab.
I think we should find, I think it needs to be controlled. I think once, like a GM virus or a GM microorganism or a GM animal or a GM plant is out in the open environment, the risks become very different. And I think controlling it is part of the game. First of all, you're going to have some controls on it, and having unregulated GE, which is what this bill does, isn't acceptable. So nothing should be completely unregulated. Someone's got to check out what you're doing. You've got to protect the exporters who are doing the GE-free thing, which is,
are you saying that it'll be unregulated? It sits inside the Environmental Protection Authority. It will have
it's exclusions. It's the exclusions from the bill that will be unregulated. All these new products, these new genomic techniques, basically 90% of the products in the pipeline are excluded from regulation of the bill. They're not because they're being redefined. They're not going to be called Jack. They're going to be called Jill. They're not going to be called gene editing or genetic engineering or GMOs.
Strange.
They're going to be called new breeding techniques, and that's going on. And
do you think, John, then the government is actually trying to tank our biggest export? Are they purposely trying to tank the industry?
That's conspiracy stuff. That's madness.
But you just said
any government would do that.
But then why would they bring this through? Why would they allow this then if they think that there's nothing that can protect our
That's what they
GE
need to
name?
see.
Why would they do it then if it's our biggest industry? If
I'll
they
leave that
didn't have
question with
faith in
you.
it.
I'll leave that question with you. But don't forget, the farmers just voted to sell their brands. Frontera Pharma selling their brands to France. Now, that, I would say, is a bizarre decision as what we're talking about. So people are making strange decisions for New Zealand exports. And I do agree with you. It's bizarre that the government should do this without the regulations in place to protect the non-GMO export production. And the other things that are not there, which is, as I say, this control on the regulator. There is parts of this bill that say, well, the regulator has to say yes if 2 other countries have approved a product. Now, that's really handing over your control and sovereignty to our competitors like America or Argentina that want to push GMOs. And our point of difference in this market means that there's both this bill and the regulator should be looking at, the cost-benefit analysis, but that's not part of it. There has not been any economic analysis of this bill. There's not been any, how much is the GE exports really worth to us? There's an estimate by one group, but we need some really
But
the farmers need
it's not
really
always about
hard
export,
data.
though, is it, John? It's not won't always be
No, it's
about
not.
export. They also want to. GMOs can cut methane emissions. They can fight climate change. They
Exactly.
can do stuff inside of New Zealand, not
All
just
those
for
hopes.
export.
I guess the farmers are saying, well, where are the examples that they've done already overseas? Or what are we going to be putting at the bleeding edge of this? And if you look to America, those things, where is the methane solution? I mean, they've got this thing, it's not GE, but they've got this Bovia bolus that's been big problems in Europe at the moment, with Denmark saying, they have animal welfare issues to stop using it. And so these new innovations are at the cost of other options. And look, we found out 10 years ago, Leah, that mixed forage, you can't patent it, but if you give animals a mixture of forage, the methane reduces by like 30%. So there are solutions out there. The question is the GE solution the best one? And at the moment, the market, I mean, I said this at the Beyond the Buzzwords panel at Lincoln, it's the market has actually said no to GMOs, not the rules here. Most countries are not producing GMOs. Most GMOs in America are being used in animal feed and in ethanol. So the market wants non-GMO. Certainly the people can afford natural, safe food. And that's why we're trading on it. So it is actually about exports. It is actually about money.
Well, it's interesting because, I mean, look, all I'm saying is I can see then if it doesn't change or they don't, I mean, what happens, John, to you, because it's supposed to come in, isn't it, by the end of the year? How do you stop this?
Well, I hope that at New Zealand First, I actually hope every MP in Parliament sees that there's need for, you've got to have something like a backstop in the bill that says you don't destroy nature. So precautionary principle needs to be in there. You've got to hold the companies doing it liable so they comply with the rules and try and keep it safe. You've got to have ethics. I mean, I don't know whether you remember, but there was a bioethics council established around genetic engineering, and it was cancelled by the government after a couple of years. But ethics is big on this. I mean, not just for humans and animal research, which we've had some, and not just for the vaccines, but also for the future, because you've got people talking about, I mean, there's crazy stuff, making up perfect humans, gene editing humans, merging with the machine, and the real vision of eugenics, I guess. So the ethical side has been completely sidelined in this bill, and I think if anything, New Zealand First should say, well, we've got to have precaution, we've got to have ethics, and we've got to make sure that people have a choice, because of course it's coming our way. We're already importing G ingredients, but they're supposed to be labelled, and as I say, you don't see much in the supermarket because even the supermarkets have got a non-GMO policy for their own brands like Mac, Crow and Pam's. The market has actually spoken, and now if we take away labelling and choice for farmers and consumers, we're kind of like hijacking the market.
Do you think is there any part of this that you think New Zealand would fall behind in knowledge and maybe expertise? We could miss out on benefits with these technologies, or what you've been saying is, look, why change it? We should never change this. We could go for the next 100 years and stay the same, and we will be the only ones in the world that will be GE free, and everyone's going to want us even more.
Well, I think that's the case, but informed by the science. The The science, somebody said to me, hey, mate, organics is climate action. So is agroecology and regenerative agriculture. There's all these things, but they are informed by science. And of course, there's the uses of gene technology that people do feel comfortable with, like marker-assisted breeding, where you're looking at the genes in a plant or in an animal and looking to see what's beneficial and then cross-breeding them naturally. But I guess it is an emotional thing. The scientists can argue to the end of time that, this is natural. We're going to take it into a lab, we're going to genetically engineer it, but it's still natural. Well, consumers don't see it that way all over the world. They say, no, I actually quite like the traditional breeding. I mean, that's what, as Esprit's had a huge success, 30% up in America this year. We're winning this game. Don't blow it. The world wants what we've got, and it just happens to be the non-GMO option. So whatever the use of gene editing ethically, we've got to preserve that non-GMO export advantage.
How much of this do you think is the majority just do not understand this?
Well, it's interesting. I think even the farmers who say they want the option, they like the idea of GE, they don't really understand it. And as I say, when they understand that there's a sleight of hand here, when they understand that, so they're going to be making these gene-edited products and our products patented and sold, but they may not tell us, that's when they get worried. That's when consumers get worried, because it is about navigating that choice. If the consumer's king and queen, if the farmer has to meet the market and what the market wants, well, the market needs to have a voice. And if you take away labeling, as they have done, well, there is. That's what we've got now. That's what we've got now.
No, but can they can the government still advance part of this bill and still keep GMOs out, but have advances in other parts of it?
I think they can. I think, as I said, we can use genetic science in the lab. We can use contained production. We can use it ethically for medicine. I think there's lots of uses, and we already do it. And I think there's been a bit of a kind of, misleading the public. There has been no ban. We've maybe had rules that are so strict that no one's bothered to apply. But I think the bigger issue is that we've also got a market. Over the last 20 years, not only has the science changed, but the market has changed globally. And over in China and India, they want non-GE products. That's the markets we're targeting.
Yeah, well, all I know is whatever they... and that's why we're paying so much money for all our products, isn't it? That was what the market wants.
And it feels nice.
That's why Kiwis can't afford to actually eat what we're producing anyway, John. So why is this even an argument?
But when we go to buy the too expensive butter at the supermarket, at least we know it's GE-free. We can feel good about it. And certainly the vegetables, which have come down in price, if it's grown in New Zealand, it's all non-GMO. We've got this thing. We've got a reputation and a point of difference that has got some value in it.
So someone has asked, can someone please give me an example of where a GMO crop has harmed anyone? Or are we just confusing comic book movies with reality?
Well, we've heard of like Roundup and glyphosate. I mean, that's the big one that a lot of people in America have been worried about, because the harm that's come from people from glyphosate going on to the GE crops designed to absorb the glyphosate and survive it, which is a lot of the GE crops, these Roundup Ready crops. I mean, even the Academy of Pediatricians in America put out a study last year, I think it was, for mums to avoid the GE crops because they're so heavily sprayed with Roundup. Now, your caller, your writer might say, oh, look, Roundup's nothing wrong with glyphosate. I drink it all the time. Well, to be honest, there's a lot of people who are very concerned about glyphosate, and all over the world. So to have glyphosate surviving crops like the GE crops in America is not a good idea. And the classic example of things that can go wrong, there was a thing called Starlink corn, and it was approved for animal feed because there was a suspected allergen. Well, actually, I think it was an allergen in the crop for humans, so it mustn't be given to humans because some people might be allergic. It got confused in the food system, and they had to pull it out. And it took about $1 billion to withdraw this Starlink corn from the food system that had spread by accident. So these things do happen. And of course, there's the classic ancient example, which is the L-tryptophan food supplement or dietary supplement, which was the first example of, I guess, precision fermentation. And hundreds of people died and thousands got sick by the Shawadenko production of this L-tryptophan in microorganisms. And it was an example of, hang on, is it contamination that's caused this sickness? Is it the GE process that's created a new product that we didn't know about, that we didn't test for. What happened with the L-tryptophan, we don't know, because they destroyed the samples, actually, unfortunately. So no one quite knows. But I think there is a history of regulation is the backstop that ensures safety. If you take regulation away, then you ain't got no pathway to safety or checking or withdrawing the product or holding the company liable for causing a problem or a mistake. So that's why the integrity of the food system's in place or needs to be in place. And I think, those are the three examples that come to mind now. And thankfully, regulation and what is coming into New Zealand in imported food does not seem to have caused many problems.
Yeah. Jon, very interesting.
I mean, Americans haven't got a good health record. They're eating the most GMOs as far as I can tell.
Always good to catch up, Jon. I appreciate your time today, and look, we will probably talk close to maybe early next year. We'll see what happens. That is,
it could be our last G-free Christmas. Could be the last Christmas. You know what's on your bloody plate. You know those Brussels sprouts are real Brussels sprouts. A real pavlova is a real pavlova. Thanks, Leah. All the best.
Thanks, Jon. That is Jon Carapiet from GE Free New Zealand. So, look, your thoughts, guys. Farmers, particularly, but everyone. As I said, the government intends to reform genetic modification laws to provide, they say, more enabling and modern regulation.